In today's video, we have some NHL trade rumors talking about guys like OEL possibly being linked to the Oilers, Jack Eichel to Vegas. Will we see some big moves out of Calgary like Monahan, Gaudreau, or Tkachuk? We also have some free agent rumors as well, and COVID has impacted Montreal yet again. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We have a variety of free agent and trade rumors to talk about here today, but we do have a few other quick news items to get into before we get into the latest in that front. First up, like I said, the Montreal Canadiens have once again been impacted by the COVID virus. We have a player who's Joel Armia on COVID protocol list and is going to be unable to travel with the team to go to Tampa for the first two games of their Stanley Cup Final series against the Lightning. Now, it's not completely ruled out that he'll be available for game two, but at this point, he's not going to be able to likely be available for game one for sure. Of course, when players go on the protocol list, we don't know the reasons why, so it could be a variety of things, and some of it could be investigated further and then later released. Not everybody ends up on the COVID protocol list for 14 days. Now, Dominic Ducharme, the head coach, is still in that protocol, and we've announced here within the last day or two that it's believed he will be available for game three when the Habs return home after facing the Lightning for the first two games on the road. If you think about it back, the 14 days would be up right around that time, so makes sense. But when it comes to Armia, keep in mind he could have tested positive. That could be the reason why. It could be a case of he was identified as a close contact to another positive case. There could have been something irregular about his test. Like, there's a variety of things. It doesn't mean 100% that he is positive and will have to be out for 2 weeks, because if that's the case, he'll miss the entire Stanley Cup Final. So we'll have to await further word. Of course, he's been a pretty important piece on that line with Eric Stahl and Corey Perry. They've chipped in offensively and played well at the other end of the ice as well. So I'm not sure what could happen as far as roster goes. I mean, I know it looks like Jake Evans was getting close to returning. I don't know if he's totally ready to go. If he is, he could probably jump into that spot in the lineup, and they shouldn't be impacted too much, but Armia's been a pretty good player for them, and if he's not there, it's certainly going to be debatable on how they handle things, and it's just unfortunate to see COVID having an impact here on this series. I just hope for their sake that it doesn't spread any further, because, I mean, keep in mind, when we first had Ducharme test positive, and then GM of the Golden Knights, McCrimmon, tested positive, like, you know, it's a 14-day cycle. Like, we know we're only halfway through here since the coach was testing positive. So in the next week, like, you just never know. Like, I hope that it just doesn't become a major issue. Having one player is enough, let alone several. So we'll see what happens here, and hopefully get further word that maybe he's lucky and gets cleared before too long. Now, staying with the Montreal Canadiens, there's also been a lot of talk about the few remaining coaching vacancies around the NHL. We've got the Buffalo Sabres and the Arizona Coyotes. Now, in the case of the Sabres, many believe interim head coach Don Granato does have the inside track to getting that job, but Adams and the other members of the Sabres staff and ownership, because you know they're likely involved, want to speak to as many other people as possible just to kind of confirm that they definitely have the right guy. Don Granato, after taking over from Ralph Krueger, saw some pretty good progress in a lot of their players, especially some of their younger important pieces. They had some better results. Things were trending up, so it's believed he definitely has the inside track, but they certainly have talked to a variety of other people there. One of them likely being Rick Tocchet, who has not taken a job in Seattle. He was in the mix in the Rangers organization, so after being snubbed on a couple of occasions, Tocchet's still out there and could be a potential candidate for the Sabres. Now, when it comes to the Coyotes job, Elliot Friedman talked about on his podcast that came out today the possibility, this is just his gut feeling, that they might want to wait and talk to Luke Richardson, who of course is an assistant with the Montreal Canadiens and currently serving as their head coach since Dominic Ducharme is out in COVID protocols. We've seen that he's done a really good job. He's a guy who's been around the NHL a long time, played a long time first of all, and has been coaching a long time. I know way back it was believed he likely should have been the head coach of the Ottawa Senators, because he was in their organization at the AHL level as an assistant level, and then kind of got overlooked for a head coaching opportunity, and then end up leaving and went to Montreal and has been a good solid assistant there ever since. And many believe he wants to be a head coach, and when the opportunity presents itself, that he probably will take it. And like I said on the podcast today, Friedman was talking about that possibility that after getting a bit of a taste of it here in Montreal with Ducharme's absence and doing a good job, that it might have raised some, eyebrows in Arizona to maybe wait and speak to him before they make any final decisions. Lane Lambert in the Islanders organization is another one. Now that they're finished, could possibly get a look there too. But in the case of Richardson, another thing that Friedman mentioned that could very well give him a bit of an inside track is that he's extremely close with the Chychrun family, and of course, Jacob Chychrun is one of the key pieces that the Coyotes intend to build around. I mean, it's likely they're going to move out some of their veteran pieces, but he's going to likely be probably one of their main younger players, if not the main one, that they will build around from the back end out. And of course, with those two families being close, and doesn't mean that Chychrun's really got a lot of say in what they're going to do for hiring, but it just might, give him a little bit of an inside edge to be considered, and he's deserving of an opportunity. So we will see. But obviously, once the Habs are done for the year, once the Stanley Cup's awarded, if the Coyotes still at that point do not have a head coach named, then I would imagine it's likely because they wanted to wait and speak to him before making any final decisions. And there's no guarantees, of course. He'll obviously have to get consent from the Habs to interview, assuming his contract is beyond this year. And usually for assistant coaches, we don't always know that, so I don't know exactly what his contract status is with Montreal, but he could need permission, and they have to grant that, of course, and we'll see what happens. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of free agent and trade rumors to look at today. I want to look at a couple of free agent talk here heading into this offseason and some of the teams that have only been out a short time. But for starters, with the Carolina Hurricanes, I know I just put out their Carolina Hurricanes offseason video just earlier today. And one of the players I talked a little bit about was forward Jordan Martinook. Now, Martinook's, like I said, he's a glue guy in that room. He's an important piece. He might only be a bottom six guy, but he contributes in a variety of ways, including being a real leader on and off the ice. Certainly sets the tone in the room and is a really good motivator, and just a guy who can lead by example and work hard. And a lot of teams need a guy or two like that around to kind of rally the troops, and he certainly, like I said, has been a great guy for that group ever since he's been there. Now, it's believed, though, that unfortunately he's likely come to an end of the road here with the Hurricanes, and I know he has a fairly significant surgery this offseason as well, which could impact what happens when it comes to getting a next contract too. But apparently his father has gone on social media and had a post up, which I haven't seen myself, but I've seen, at least trusted sources indicating that this has happened. And then actually Friedman mentioned it as well, that his dad said that it's the end of the road with the Carolina Hurricanes. So it looks as though Jordan Martinook will be moving on. Of course, we know Dougie Hamilton is a good chance he's moving on. And Warren Fogle in Carolina, likely he's a pending RFA, very well gets dealt because of the fact that he wants more of an opportunity, and he's just likely not going to get it there with the forwards that are playing ahead of him on the depth chart. So we very well could see a decent amount of turnover in that Canes roster heading into next year. And of course, another player too, when it comes to the New York Islanders, of course, freshly eliminated off their loss to the Lightning, did their end of season media availability earlier today. And I know one name that kind of came up, which has already been circulating a little bit, was center iceman Casey Cizikas, who's played with the Islanders a long time. He's a pending UFA. Of course, he's going to be north of 30 now. That seems to be impacting his contract, and it looks as though that the Islanders may not be bringing him back, which to me, I thought they very well might. But if they do, if there's any chance of it happening, he's going to have to take less money than he can get elsewhere. But I mean, him and Clutterbuck and Martin have been a staple in that team, and a real energy line. Can play, a good forecheck, hard to play against. Obviously not afraid to drop the gloves, provide that grit and toughness. And I don't think he'll have any shortage of opportunities. I mean, he's getting a little bit older, but you're not going to sign him to a 6-8 year contract or anything like that. But to give a guy 2 to 3 years at his current age, who can be a real solid bottom six guy, bring all that experience, I don't think there'd be any shortage of opportunities for Cizikas elsewhere. So we'll see what happens. But at this point, indications are pointing to the fact that he likely leaves the island this offseason. Quick update on a couple of RFAs as well in Vancouver. Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, of course, are going to have very important contracts for that franchise, and what they decide to do there is going to have a major role in the team's salary cap and many of the other moves they may make this offseason. Now, when it comes to those two, they're now represented by the same agent. We saw Elias Pettersson change agents last offseason, which kind of lined him up to work with the same guy as Quinn Hughes here, which is JP Barry. And of course, they're looking to do, we're not going to see twin contracts like we had with Taves and Kane, but right now things are looking like Quinn Hughes is likely going to get the long-term deal, probably 7 to 8 years, maybe 6, but at least 6, probably 7 or 8, whereas Pettersson's likely taking a shorter term bridge deal, which is either going to likely be 3 or 5. They really don't want to obviously do a 4 because that walks him right to free agency. They can get him at 3 years. He's still an RFA with a year to go before UFA status kicks in. Or if they go 5, then of course they buy up a little bit of that time and get a couple of UFA years purchased here under contract. So that would probably be the preferred contract length for Pettersson. If they're not going to get him at 7 or 8 years, then a 5-year deal is likely going to be where it's at, which is going to be a little bit more costly on the average annual value. It could be more costly longer term, of course, because if he continues to improve and put up huge numbers like he's capable of, it could drive his price up longer term as well. But those two guys are well underway here for the contract negotiations. Of course, we don't know exactly when they're going to get something done, but that's where things are at. At least we have a pretty good idea what the terms are likely going to be. Now, before we jump into the trade talk here today, I do want to just take a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Now, jumping into today's NHL Trade Rumours, I do want to focus on a couple of items, but first up, I want to look at the Calgary Flames. Now, of course, as I mentioned a couple of times on the channel, there was a lot of chatter about Matthew Tkachuk, and a lot of the other news outlets have been picking up on it after we heard the comments from Shane O'Brien on NHL Network Radio and SiriusXM. Of course, he claimed to have sources saying that Tkachuk wanted out. Now, we've heard numerous more reputable NHL insiders talking to connected sources, completely refusing to believe that that's anywhere near the truth. Now, of course, Chris Johnston as well from Sportsnet has recently weighed in on this, and he basically said at this point he doesn't believe it to be true, but he does not believe that Matthew Tkachuk is completely untouchable. And his words were that there's likely going to be a fundamental shift in that roster in Calgary. So likely that Tkachuk does not go anywhere. That's the most likely scenario. But he just said that given where the team is at and how they failed to produce, and they either get in the playoffs or go out early, or this past year they've really taken a step back. So clearly they need to make some changes. So he said he wouldn't rule out anything, but Tkachuk is a lot less likely to go. He feels either one or both of Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau are substantially more likely to be traded. Now, of course, Gaudreau's got 1 year left on his contract. As I've stated before, they need to make a decision on his future, and it has to be done this offseason. They either extend him and make him a part of the team going forward and figure out ways to build around him so that he can hopefully get over the hump and be a better playoff performer, or they need to trade him before he walks as a UFA, because I know there's many out there who believe he will bolt given the opportunity in free agency. Now, he's also said all the right things that make you think that maybe he will sign and stay after all. But as I've cautioned people numerous times, you can't take a lot of those comments at face value, because they're not going to come out and say anything against the organization that they're currently employed with and give you any kind of indications on their future plans. That's just not how things work. So clearly he's going to keep that kind of close to the vest. And if he's really thinking about the fact that he would like to leave when given a chance, he's never going to say that publicly. So we'll have to see what happens. But Gaudreau and Monahan, much more likely to be traded according to CJ, and obviously Matthew Tkachuk most likely stays, but unless they're wowed with a deal that would completely really change this team, you have to think that that would be the only circumstance they'd even consider it. But with Mark Giordano, the current captain, likely being exposed, and you have to think in the expansion draft that if he's available with a 1 year on his deal, I think there's a pretty good chance that Seattle takes him. I know when I've done my mock drafts for the Seattle roster, I've considered it, and I think they should too. I mean, they need a veteran guy who can be a leader, maybe be their first captain if they want to go down that road early on. It doesn't mean he has to stay long term or at the current contract rate at least. Can sign, play for 1 year at what he has now. If he likes it there and they like him, it's a good fit. But maybe they sign him to a shorter term extension for less money. It's hard to say, but either way, he likely goes. And if that's the case, you're going to need a new captain, and Matthew Tkachuk could be that guy. But I think a lot of that kind of stems back to earlier in the year when they had the situation against the Leafs where Jake Muzzin flipped that puck at Tkachuk, and of course he kind of flipped out, and a lot of his teammates seemed to be a little bit unhappy with him, we could say, on how he handled it. And of course, you get a lot of the Tkachuk antics. And it seems like there was a meeting kind of telling them, like, you can't have this all the time. You're becoming a distraction to the team or something to that effect. Because as I mentioned myself numerous times, to me, Matthew Tkachuk was not the same after that. He seemed like he really toned things down. And to me, he's not going to be as successful of a player if he's not playing that gritty style, get under your skin. And some of those antics, yes, like a little bit of that can be put away. But for the most part, he's got to be that other kind of player, or he's just not effective enough. Like, his numbers were down. He wasn't as hard to play against this year. And it just, I don't know, it just wasn't good. So to me, he has to be himself. And if you're not going to let him be himself, then the success level is not going to be there. So I can understand why there might be some frustration, but I don't think we're at a point yet where he's saying, get me out of here, I can't take this anymore. Now, jumping over to the Jack Eichel and the Vegas Golden Knights scenario. Now, this is something that I originally brought up a few days ago after Vegas was eliminated by Montreal, and my own personal thoughts on the situation was that their biggest need in Vegas is down the middle. That's their weakest spot. They're really not weak anywhere else. And to me, like, they do have some good centers. They just don't have that true number one game-breaking kind of guy who can work with guys like Stone and Pacioretty and really just be that difference maker. Like, look at Tampa. Like, you got Braden Point, Steven Stamkos. Like, it's a whole different animal there. And even really, to be honest, like, look at what Nick Suzuki's doing in Montreal. Like, I'm not sure how Vegas feels about that trade. They're probably still happy with it because Pacioretty has been a real good player for them. Even though they're seeing Nick Suzuki really succeed in Montreal, they had to believe that he was going to be a successful hockey player when they traded him, clearly. So, you know what? I mean, you can't take things back. It is what it is. But say they had Suzuki, then they wouldn't have Pacioretty. I don't know how they feel about it, but at the same time, he could have been the center that they were looking for, but then they'd have other weaknesses. So, c'est la vie, right? But it is what it is. But a lot of other NHL insiders have now chimed in. They kind of acknowledge the fact, what I was talking about, that they feel a lot of the same way. I mean, we've seen TSN's Darren Dreger mention things in the last day, and Elliot Friedman, again, on his podcast today, talking about the fact that they might not have inside scoops saying for sure that they're going to do this, but they have both believe that there's absolutely no doubt that they will get involved because that's the Bill Foley style. That's the Vegas style. They're aggressive. They want to win now. They don't want to be patient and be one of these franchises that, might not see a cup for 20, 30, 40, 50 years like a lot of NHL teams have been waiting for, and that, they're going to be aggressive here. So, and they have the pieces to do it. There's no doubt. I mean, they might have to take a hit. I don't know what Buffalo's going to want because that price is going to change. All the rumors right now are suggesting 6 pieces, which to me just is not going to happen. If teams will wait Kevin Adams out, and that'll come down. There's no doubt about that. But certainly Vegas will be in the mix here like we've been talking about. We now have a lot of more sources kind of corroborating that story, saying that they're 100% going to get involved and have the pieces to do it. From a cap perspective, some people might be looking at their cap space saying, well, they can't do it. Yes, they can, because for one, many believe Fleury's going to go, so there's $7 million in open space, and all it's going to take is that and one more player off the roster, and boom, you've got your space. So, yeah, it's going to make things tight on other areas, because you also don't know what else is going to be included in the Eichel trade. There's going to have to be at least one roster player that would go to Buffalo, which would, take that off, you send Fleury away, boom, you get your space. So, hard to say exactly how everything goes, because there's going to be other pieces moving around, but it is possible based on player movement here. Now, lastly, I do want to touch on Oliver Ekman Larsson and the possibility of going to the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I've seen a couple of articles making this suggestion, and after researching it a little further, it does kind of make a lot of sense. Now, we know that the Arizona Coyotes are looking to move their captain. There's no doubt. It's been corroborated by a number of NHL insiders saying that he's 100% on the market and that they're looking for a future-based package, and they're even willing to retain some salary on his contract to bring that AAV down from $8.25 million, and they're also willing to take back an unfavorable contract, but something that's ideally a little bit lower in the AAV and less on term, because obviously Ekman Larsson signed a really lengthy deal, and I think he still has like 6 or 7 years left on it, so certainly they want something with less term. Now, looking at the Edmonton Oilers, a couple of things stand out here. For one, they do have some question marks on their blue line. We don't know if Tyson Barrie's coming back. We don't know really where things stand with some of their prospects like Bouchard and Broberg. They have a guy like Darnell Nurse, who I do believe they want to make a huge part of their future, but he's going into the last year of his contract, and he's going to need an extension, and to me, they should probably try to get ahead of that this year instead of doing it during the season or later on, but they do have some other things. But the Oilers do have some other business they're likely going to have to tend to first. And they also include Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on this high priority list too, and getting all that figured out. But a couple of things to keep in mind here is that, for one, from a cap space perspective, let's say that Arizona retains enough salary to get his AAV down to, I don't know, somewhere around 5.5, something in that range. And then on top of that, for the Oilers, maybe they take the James Neal contract. Maybe they take the Kyle Turris contract. Turris only has 1 year left at 1.6. Neal has 2 years at 5.75. Like, they could take Neal, and if they retain enough salary on Ekman Larsson, that could offset the actual financial, at least for the next couple of years. I mean, beyond that, they'll have to figure it out. And then you throw in some other pieces, like picks and prospects, and it's not unreasonable to think that they could pull off this kind of trade. Now, they also have Adam Larsson on the blue line. That has to get figured out too. But the one reason, the main kind of common denominator here connecting OEL to Edmonton, and it might make it attractive for him too, is that his former coach Dave Tippett is now the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. OEL probably had more success under Tippett than any other coach that he's worked for. So clearly there's that personal connection that might make things enticing, and it might make it Tippett might feel like he can be the guy to kind of help him get his swagger back. And he might make it so that OEL would want to waive to go there, given their relationship. So no guarantees that it actually happens, of course. We don't have any rumors to suggest that they're definitely having conversations, but there is enough insiders who believe the Oilers are at the very least interested in looking at all those connections there. You connect the dots, it does kind of make sense. So to me, do you think it makes sense? So in my opinion, it does kind of make sense, but of course, there's a lot of moving parts in Edmonton from a cap perspective. Like I said, you get Adam Larsson, you get Nugent-Hopkins, you got to figure out your goaltending. It's, one of those things like Vancouver was in last year. They were very, very interested as well, but they had so much going on when it comes to free agency and the whole roster that they just kind of lost track of a lot of things. And to me, it was too overwhelming, and they ended up, ultimately losing some players because of it. So I don't know if a similar thing will happen in Edmonton. We've got a condensed offseason. They've got a lot of business to take care of in a short period of time, and just we'll have to see if they will be the ones to end up finding a way to make this happen. So let me know your thoughts on OEL to Edmonton, as well as the other free agent and trade rumors discussed here today. We'll discuss further in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.